In this session, we are going to continue our journey in helping Joe's Pizza. So we have a requirement to say that Joe decides that he wants to have some personal time as long as he can make enough income. So in addition to regular transaction recording, which means the process we had before is still valid, he also wants to compute a computer to monitor the running total. If the total sales is greater than 100, let me change this to 200 so it's easier to count. The computer program should give him a sum of sales, tell him to go home and exit. So basically, we are going to add one test, one if condition. If running total, the total variable greater than 200, then we should do certain things. Give him the sum of sales, tell him to go home and exit. In addition, the second transaction control is he only makes 200 worth of pizza every day. Modify your program so that if the running total will exceed 200, print a warning and do not add this value to running total. Let me still change this to 100. So instead, go to the beginning of the loop statement block and wait for the next transaction. So let's copy this file and create a new class. This time we call it assignment 3 sales control. Now, let me call it sales control 1. So, or sales control total. Once the total exceeds 100, okay, let's rename it. Rename the file so that the class name is same as the file name. Now, what I would like to do is actually copy everything here because the whole process is still the same, right? So I'm going to copy this whole file, just changing the name of the class. I'm going to copy the main method altogether. Now we have a regular transaction. And remember, Joe said he wants to keep the regular transaction recording, just adding one logic for this and just adding another logic for this. So we are going to have, don't forget, we still need to have Java doc comment, which I will copy over. And I think we to add some line break so that you can see the whole text within the screen. Okay, so now inside the do while loop, we are getting the input, we are calculating the result. After calculating the running total, and it says, once you calculate the running total, if the total sales is greater than 100, right? This is the logic we are going to add. So we will do this after the transaction. So let's, if the running greater than 100, give him the sum of sales, tell him he can go home and exit. And here exit apparently means go outside of while loop, right? And how do we put this if statement? If statement says, if the total sales is greater than 100, so total greater than 100, then we should print out the total. And actually, because this one is already here, once we exit, we will print out the total sales. So we can skip this part. Let me try to add it first. Let me try to implement the logic first so that you will see how it works in reality. And then we can make adjustment to it. Tell him to go home, which means I'm going to, you can go home now. And exit. Exit here means going outside of do while. And what is the statement that we use to break outside of a loop? It's break. So if the total is greater than 100, then we will print out this information and we have a break. Break will make us going outside of do, and it will have us print out this sales again. Let's say I will do one transaction is good enough, right? So you can see these two are redundant. So in fact, you can remove this printout here, but this will be a minor fix that we will care about later. And then for the second question, we will do the same thing. We are going to copy the sales running total. We are going to create the class. Sales limit. We're going to put a limit to the sales. And we have the sales running totals main method. We're going to copy this all over so that we still have, we will inherit everything we have for the calculation, for all of this calculation. The only difference is we are going to add the logic here, but before that, let's add the Java doc comment with our question. So Joe only makes 200 words running total. Instead, going to the beginning of loop. So what we are going to do is, if the total plus the latest, the sales goes beyond the sales, beyond 200, then we shall skip the calculation, right? So here, what we are going to do is, if, I'm going to copy this over. Otherwise, so we are going to put if statement here. And the if statement will be running total plus there is sales greater than 200. Then we will print out not a valid input. Total beyond 200. Else, we will copy the whole part here. So by using if else, we are breaking the logic into two branches. If total plus the latest sales greater than 200, we are going to just print a warning, but do not perform the rest of the calculation as well as the user prompt. Now, if I want to put this outside, that's okay too. but then you will need to enter yes and no again. In order to completely skip the rest of the calculation, you can also add a continue, right? But let's comment this continue out first, and let's run it, see what will happen. So I'm entering cells 1, 2, 3. Is there more coming? Yes. And the cells, now this time I'm going to input 100, so it will go beyond 200. It's beyond 200, I get a notification. Is there more transaction coming? It's still asking, and I will say yes. And then one more, then I will say no. So this is the valid flow without continue. However, you can see that is there more transaction coming is not necessary when you actually have invalid cells. So because if you have another cells and this transaction is invalid, that means you still have something to sell, right? That makes sense. So in this case, I will use a continue to skip the rest of the code. So if I run this and it says 1, 2, 3, yes, more coming. And this time 100, so it go beyond 200, not the valid total beyond. There's an exception because of this chart, because there's no more transactions. But basically, you can see that continue is useful in breaking out of the loop, but it's not as useful as break can be, because break will be completely breaking out of a loop, while continue will just do a loop. So if you usually when you have a continue logic, you can put the rest into the same block, into the else block. For this reason, continue is not so widely used, but still it's something that you can know and you can use to control your execution flow.